We are in Rome. The year is 65 AD. The Emperor Nero has fallen in love with the enchanting Poppea. Seduced by her charms, he vows to banish his wife Octavia and crown Poppea empress. However, there are some people who stand in the way of this plan. First, Nero's advisor Seneca counsels Nero to follow reason and to not go through with the divorce. In response, the cruel emperor has him sentenced to death. Next, Octavia laments being a scorned queen and teams up with Poppea's cuckolded husband Otho to murder Poppea. However, the plot ultimately fails, and Nero now has the perfect excuse to exile Octavia. As she departs Rome, Poppea is crowned, and she and Nero sing a duet in celebration of their love.
Very nice.
Yes, there's a lot more to it, but
I love it. Hi, I'm Elizabeth Fricky, and this is the Classical Connections podcast. In this episode, we discuss the upcoming Indiana University opera production, The Coronation of Poppea, composed by Claudio Monteverdi for the Venetian premiere in 1643. Today, we have three guests who will help us to get closer to Monteverdi's final opera. First, we have IU doctoral musicology student Jackie Westerduin, who will be giving pre-opera lectures for Poppea later this week.
In your head, you're thinking, should I be celebrating these people? So there is this moral conflict, I think, at the center of the work.
Next, we have internationally renowned director and choreographer Candace Evans, who is working with the IU Opera Company on this brand new production.
What a miracle it is that a piece written so long ago is still so absolutely resonant to the human condition and the choices we make and the choices that are made for us.
And finally, we have Deepa Johnny, a master's student in vocal performance who will be performing the role of Poppea on Friday, October 15th.
It's just like a playground and everyone is playing. It's just so much fun. And even being in the thick of the pandemic, people have such a desire to express themselves and, really share in their musicality and artistry. And it's really apparent.
Now, let's dive into the scandal and the drama of Monteverdi's Coronation of Poppea. Enjoy the show.
So the Coronation of Poppea was composed for the 1642 to 1643 carnival season in Venice. And what's important about Venetian opera as opposed to opera in other cities such as Florence or Mantua or Rome was that it was not a courtly affair, but rather a public affair. Venice was a mercantile city, and the operas as such needed to make profit in order to be sustained. So opera was mounted during the carnival season when the population in Venice would double in size with tourists and actors and acting troupes, and the success of the operas depended on their marketability to a wide variety of audiences. So this affected what would go into the plot, the libretto, the music, and because they needed to be profitable, the theaters typically employed smaller orchestras rather than the larger orchestras of the courts. The Coronation of Poppea was one of the first operas to be written about historical events rather than mythological events. The librettist Giovanni Francesco Busanello took for his source material mostly the writings of the Roman philosopher Tacitus. However, he does make some liberal changes to the historical events, and he's the first to admit it because he's thinking as an artist rather than as a historian. For instance, he essentially distills about 5 years worth of history into a 24-hour period, compressing time and events. Additionally, there are some characters who change. For instance, Otho receives a lot more attention in Poppea. Historically, he was fairly content with living away from Poppea while she and Nero did their thing. He had a good life. But in the opera, he's sort of driven mad with jealousy and delirium over his love for Poppea, which I think is important because another character who has changed from his historical counterpoint is Octavia. Historically, she is only a victim. She treated cruelly by Nero, banished, and then later killed. But in the opera, she is a victim and a villain. So after she realizes that Nero plans to banish her and take Poppea for a wife, she plans to take action and enlists Otho to murder Poppea. So she becomes sort of the primary antagonist in the opera. This kind of plays into that interpreting history from a 17th century Venetian standpoint. So Busanello, the librettist, was a member of the Italian intellectual group, the Accademia degli Incogniti, otherwise known as the Incogniti, in like the 1630s, 1640s, which is right at the time of the inception of Venetian opera. And they were very influential in the operas at the time. And they had a lot of interesting beliefs, which I think would be surprising to modern audiences. They were very patriotic. They believed in the Venetian Republic over Roman Empire, and they kind of stood in opposition to that, as well as they were proud skeptics, and they questioned the authority of the church and the church's teachings, and they had all these debates on power of love, the tyranny of love, and of course women. Looking back on history, Busanello manipulated some of these historical events to serve an incogniti agenda. Monteverdi had been living in Venice since about 1613, and he had written a couple of operas before, Orfeo being probably the most famous. And so when opera became a thing in Venice, started in 1637, it took him a couple years. He was older at this point. Poppea is actually his final opera and possibly his final work. And the fact that he was able to produce this 3-hour, 3-act opera at this age is a testament to his own stamina. But that being said, at this point, which is, a lot of people like to compare Poppea to Orfeo, one of his first opera works, because his style has changed so much. Instead of only kind of word painting, where he takes a word, and so if the word is high, he'll make the pitch go higher, and if the word is low, or if you're feeling low, he'll make the pitch go lower. This simple word painting. He will actually begin to take an entire mood of a text or a section and dramatize that whole thing musically. And in Poppea, when Octavia is singing her famous aria, the Disprezzata Regina, she does, it's a little bit of both. She sings this one really fabulous line. She sings in mostly this like halting recitative. You don't get too much lyrical singing with her, but when she sings this one line about she's cursing Jove for his impotence and he wants him to strike Nero down with a thunderbolt. And when she sings that, and I believe the word is formini, this great line down. It's like thunderbolt striking downward scale motion. It's really vivid word painting right there, and I love that. But at the same time, she's embodying this reactive character, and you get that in the music where she jumps from one emotion to the next, and the music matches this excitement, this aggravation, the aggressiveness. There's a moment in the piece where she sings about Nero and Poppea and how Nero is now in the arms of Poppea, and for a moment the music embodies that sensual lyricism that Poppea and Nero have. So she's literally overcome with this idea of Nero and Poppea together to the point where she's almost miming it with her music. So Monteverdi's doing a lot of really cool things with the music, and he's got to match, of course, all the strange ambiguities that Busanello has put into the plot, all that sort of incogniti agenda, moral ambiguities. He has to reconcile that with the music, and he does it in a way that's so convincing.
This is my 6th time directing for IU. This will be number 6. Some of my past productions here, Candide, Akhenaten, Florencia, and El Amazonas, big shows, really large cast, large chorus on the MAC stage. So this is my first time in our hall and in doing a piece that's less chorus driven, and certainly the first in this genre. So I approach all of my work through the text as well as through the music. So Strauss would be laughing with me. Prima la musica, or whatever, depending. So my work is really informed by my knowledge of all those different aspects. I'm very, very firm on performers being physically connected It's not a simply stand and sing, although with this piece there is more of that, of necessity, because of the music. Because we are doing a Baroque piece, the orchestra's on stage with us. So half of the stage is orchestral. So we have, that parameter. So people won't be romping, I can't provide that. But it's really important to me, as a director, there have been many occasions where the super titles failed. And so the audience has to be able to know what, even if there's no guidelines. And that story is told through the voice and through the physicality and the physical reactions of the performers. So that's a very strong component of my work, is to free them out of their head. So that's a huge component of my work. And acting truth, of course. You've got to tell the truth, even if you're singing a cadenza. But it's very important to me to continue to bloom a work apropos of what's happened in culture at this point in time. Not that many people undertake Baroque opera for very obvious reasons. The instrumentation is difficult. You have a world of usually countertenors and at least pant parts situations, and it's a harder show to cast, I think, as a genre. The baseline of what my job is to tell the story well. That's why I'm here. So that between the stage and the audience, there's a through line and they can follow and be involved. They can relax and let it come. So how to do that? The first decision I made was that we are not in Togoland. It's too confusing, and it's inaccurate for how we live now, because we as a 2021 audience wouldn't understand a differentiation in how your toga was wrapped. And someone in that era would have done. They would have said, oh, well, check out that toga. He's the emperor. The other guy is just, there to wash his feet. So we need visual clues. It's Italy. I direct in Italy a lot. And when you walk down any Italian street, you see the Duomo or the cathedral, and it was built in 1410 or whatever. And there's an art museum with work from 1700, and there's a fountain that was built in Mussolini's time. And then here comes a guy in a Vespa with hats, and here's the espresso bar. And these wonderful older ladies who are going to the open air market that's been there since the turn of the century. It's a mish. It's a glorious, historical, modern mish. And I think it works literally better than any other country I've been in. I mean, certainly London has its share of it, but it isn't quite so classical. Everything in other countries tend to have trendy and historical. Italy tends to have classic beauty and design because it's always been of value. Throughout the history of Italy, when something was done, it was done well. The Italians have a phrase called la bella figura, putting your first, most beautiful self forward. So, costume-wise, it's a mish. So that's part of how I'm unwrapping it, is saying we're going across the strata of history because this story exists across the strata of history. There have always been people who had aspirations to marry somebody way in a different world than them. There have always been women who slept their way to the top. There have always been women who were accused of being frigid and divorced and summarily dismissed. These are truths. There have always been guys like Ottone who had a girl back home and another girl.
So I'm currently in my second year of my master's at Jacobs. I'm originally from the Middle East in Oman. And then I moved to Canada and did my undergrad there in Alberta. And so I just moved out to middle of nowhere, Indiana for my master's. And it's been so wonderful. The year and a half here has gone by so quickly. I mean, last year is a canceled year. But I've just had such a wonderful time here and filled with so many great musical experiences like this one coming up. I've been so blessed in the time I've been here to do a lot of role work at the MAC. So I've done 3 shows so far. So the first year was Gianni Schicchi. I sang Lauretta. And then during the pandemic, we did 2 shows, Barber of Seville. So I sang Rosina there, and then Xerxes in the spring, where I sang Xerxes. Just understanding traditions and the musical expectations is number one, I would say. But with role preparation, it's the same kind of attention to text and understanding who the character is. I think there's a lot of layers here because, yes, on that one level, it is about her ambition and her desire to be on the top and her greed and lust for power. But then that's the biggest debate, whether the love between her and Nerone is actually a real thing or if it's just 2 power-hungry people finally finding each other. You'll have to come to the show on Friday to see which way we're going with this, but I think there's a certain humanity to her character. Like, yes, she's kind of a amoral person, and it's so interesting. This is the one show where all the bad guys win, and they're celebrated. But I like bringing glimmers of vulnerability, and where you see that she is a real person and not just so greedy about climbing the ladder. I don't think I identify with Poppea at all, really. But I think that is part of the fun and the challenge. Like, I love just being able to abandon myself and totally slip into this alter ego almost, right? That I can just bring to life on stage and then keep it there, not bring it into my personal life. But it's so fun to me to explore this totally different side that I don't identify with at all, and playing with those crayons, and it's she uses these different tactics throughout the arc of the story. She's not just this one layer of seduction. Maybe that might be the overt way she exudes her power, is through seduction, but there's all these different tactics, because if one doesn't work, she has another thing to play with to get what she wants. So I guess personally, I bring to this level of femininity to it, which I think is important in playing that seductive character. Such a fun process, to see it come to life slowly, because for the first part of the semester, we're all working on it individually, coaching it with the opera coaches and faculty here. And then slowly we start to pair with different duets or other people in the cast. And now we're really in the thick of staging it. And it's so fun to see what people are bringing to the characters. It's just like a playground and everyone is playing. It's just so much fun. And even being in the thick of the pandemic, people have such a desire to express themselves and really share in their musicality and artistry, and it's really apparent in the way people are singing and bringing the show to life. It's just been so much fun.
Another thing that I think is really interesting about the opera is the relationship of gender and power and politics. This opera is called The Coronation of Poppea, right? Not Nero weds Poppea. And the fact that they centered this woman and as opposed to the emperor is a statement, I think. And women do kind of control a lot of the action. It's Poppea's ambitions to become empress. It's Octavia who devises a murder plot and becomes this active villain. And if we can go back again to these sort of ideas of Luisa Incogniti, they debated a lot about women. They didn't like chaste women. They didn't like the idea of chastity. They thought that we should live for pleasure, and I think you get that a celebration of that in the opera. But you also get this idea of this ambivalence towards women in power, and actually kind of a mistrust of women in power. Specifically in Venice at this time, they were very much putting these borders around a free, masculine Venetian republic versus a decadent, effeminate Roman Empire. What's interesting too about is that Busanello leaves out one very important character in the life of Nero, and that is Agrippina, Nero's mother, Agrippina the Younger. And she was the sort of scapegoat, powerful woman to be sort of the emblem of the dangers of feminine power. She was just ambitious, and she wanted her son to be crowned, and she was very politically astute and powerful in that way. So she's absent from this opera, and they actually blame her for Nero's wickedness. He sort of gets a pass because he's just a product of his mother. So in the opera, you kind of get a little bit of a distillation of Agrippina's this character, this powerful woman, and how she relates to politics in Octavia and Poppea. Poppea is very manipulative. She has this ambitious will to power, will to be empress. She uses her seductive qualities in order to get there. Octavia is empress for much of the opera, and she's the one who has this power, and she's the one who can command Otho to help, carry out certain deeds. And the lesson there being like, look what kind of happened to her. You can flip the script a little bit. Yes, there was certainly a antipathy towards women in power in politics, and how that tied into their own sort of idea of their republic and the empire. There's certainly like a surprising feminist tilt to this opera and these characters. I actually read a really interesting article about a nun named Arcangela Garibaldi, who, she was well known for her intellectual writings in this time. She was sort of forced to become a nun against her will, and she writes a lot about women's issues. And what's interesting is that Busanello met with her. He knew of her writings, she knew of his writings. We don't know exactly the relationship, but what's interesting is that Octavia, in her famous aria, she laments the fate of all women. She calls them the miserable sex, which is quite a stance for the time. Someone to say that this isn't just me, this is all women. We're at the mercy of the men in our lives, and we give birth to men who will then hurt us in some way, or try to control us in some way. And she does take a surprisingly feminist stance on the issue, and it might be the influence of Terabadi. One last thing I'll say about gender is that in the process, when women gain power, there's this idea that they kind of feminize the men around them. And it is interesting. I think Nero is, he does have some more active qualities, but he's really at the mercy of Poppea throughout. And then when Octavia commands Otho to murder Poppea, he wants to disguise himself. And he's only able to do so. He disguises himself as a woman. Yeah, so there's a literal emasculation of this man, and read into that what you will. I can guess what they were thinking at the time, but it's just the gender and the power is very much at the core of a lot of the action in this plot.
I always know before I come what I intend to do. With that said, I treat it as a guardrail, because then when I meet the performer, I realize, okay, they may not be comfortable with what I thought, or I see them in rehearsal and they do something far better than I had thought of. And so it's organic. It has to be. Like I said, I always come forward with strong guardrails, but I do a lot of work in big professional opera houses. And of course, you're dealing then with people with international careers who may have done a role before, or have very succinct ideas about, this is how I play Rosina, this is how I play Otello. And so I'm used to either loose shape around things or going, okay, so you don't know what to do with this. All right, here's what to do. Sit down now, stand up now, pick up the cup now. So it's always a balance as a director as to how much I direct and how much I just embrace. And that's fun. It's good. I like it. And I am taking I'm calling them my three heavenly beings, Amore, Fortuna, and Virtù. They are going to be on stage throughout the piece, because it opens with them saying, so who's in charge, really? And I think that struggle is absolutely critical to the piece. What are the choices you make? Are they because of love? Are they because of virtue? Or are they just because life just did that to you? I think that's really potent for the audience because we're all kind of in that boat throughout our lives. We think we have a strategy and a plan, and all of a sudden those rules changed, or you meet somebody, or you decide that's really a creepy choice. I need to be a better person than that. So that's the key of it. And I bring it up now because I believe Virtue is also playing Damigella. So there's doubling of two girls singing each of the heavenly beings. And other than Amore, who is kind of the big dog and stays solid, the other two are double cast. As a singer, now they're learning two roles. And it isn't just the music, and I'm not minimizing that because, whoa, is that a big ask? It's really hard music for young singers. But it's also, how can I differentiate? Fluid is a perfect word. It's a perfect word. That's exactly it. And it changes day to day, and I've got a double cast. So I've got that extra layer, I guess you would say. What drives my life? Is it love? Is it my virtue, my ethical code? Or is it just because I got slapped in the face with a decision and I'm making the best of it? Fortune is having its way with me. I think we've all dialed all those channels at different times. And I think maybe, for me, I think you make peace with each phase of your life and those things that come. And out of those three, you become who you should be. Because as you have experience with a fate situation, and you've got to make your best of it, and you have a love affair, and it goes well or it doesn't, or you make a choice because you feel it's the right thing, and you either won because of it, or you lost a job because of it. It shapes you. So I think the active decision making that we see will make us go, yep, that's still true.
Just the acoustical brilliance of Our Hall is what the show needs. I feel like it would have gotten lost in the space of the Mac, which is amazing, but this music just is perfect for Our Hall and the small ensemble that we'll have. And it's just going to be great. We wish it would house more people, but it's a whole other sound world to work with. All these different harpsichord, theorbo. It's just really cool to see how we can fit in vocally with that. The attention to ornamentation, it's huge. That's a big vehicle for expression in Baroque music. So, and it differs from Handel to Monteverdi too, right? So just, there's so many great musical moments of leaning into the dissonance, and everything means something else. And even in Poppea's sexual, rhetoric, I guess, that dissonance means something different in every page. So that has been a fun thing to explore. The duet at the end that everyone's waited 3 hours for, Por Ti Miro, is it's just so incredible to sing. And I don't know, that duet is just so stunning. But also there's actually a previous duet earlier on in the opera with Nerone and Poppea that I had never heard of before till doing this show. That is the most heightened level of sexual tension and passion, where Poppea knows finally that she's gotten her way and now she can just reel him in, kind of thing. And the staging is iconic. Oh, I can't wait for my mom to see it. But the music is stunning. It's almost so modern in the way it comes across, just the back and forth, discourse. It's just amazing. So, art imitates life. That saying is famous for a reason. We're just showing reality of things that happen, and not always does the good guy win.
You can see IU's performances of the Coronation of Poppea live in Our Hall and online at IU Music Live on October 15th and 16th at 7:30 p.m. You can check out the IU Opera and Ballet Theater website at operaballet.indiana.edu for more information about subscriptions, tickets, and how to further support opera and ballet. Thank you again to Jackie Westerduin, Candace Evans, and Deepa Johnny for joining me this week, and of course, thank you to the IU Opera and Ballet Theater for their support. As always, if you have any questions, comments, or suggestions, contact us at IU Classical Connections on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Stay tuned for next month as we discuss IU's next opera, Falstaff. We'll see you next time.
My mom's flying down from Canada to see this. I've warned her.